Good evening, everyone. Let's make a start. My name's Patrick Hall. I'm the Mayor of the City of Canning. Today is Tuesday, the 14th of February, 2023, and we're making a slightly late start at just after 6 p.m. I declare that the agenda briefing is now open. We start, of course, by acknowledging the Whadjuk people, the traditional custodians of the land. We also pay our respects to elders, both past and present. In accordance with the City of Canning policy CM105, agenda briefings are conducted for the purpose of providing elected members with a forum to ask questions of the City's administration and to receive answers to those questions to enable informed decision-making by Council at the following week's ordinary Council meeting. In accordance with the Local Government Act 1995, agenda briefings are not decision-making forums. Questions may be asked and answered, and there is to be no debate or discussion. Questions must be specifically relevant to the item being discussed. Elected members and employees must disclose any financial proximity or partiality interest they have in an item to be discussed and declare the nature of that interest at the commencement of the briefing or at the latest when the item is to be discussed. If a member or employee has a financial proximity or partiality interest in a matter arising during discussion, the nature of that interest must be disclosed as soon as possible after the matter is raised. Interests are to be disclosed in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government Act 1995 as they apply to council meetings. Individuals disclosing an interest other than a partiality interest must not participate in that part of a briefing relating to their interest and must leave the room while the item is being discussed. Public briefings are public meetings, of course, and any information provided to the meeting by attendees may be publicly accessible. And can I also ask this evening, as I always do, to make sure your mobile phones are please turned off. I don't want to see anyone on their mobile phones tonight, please. Turn your phones off, put them away, or at least on silent for the remainder of the meeting. Cameras are now installed in the council chamber, which will enable video recording of this meeting to be live streamed to the city via the city's YouTube channel, and that is occurring right now. Just before we move on, I just wanted to say, just from the chair, I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank the community for the many cards and messages of congratulations on my recent birthday. It was a thank you so much to the community. And I did, however, want to say a few words about an article that appeared in last week's newspaper. It's a matter that I've discussed a number of times in relation to goings on, and I just wanted to say how betrayed I felt when I learnt through local media that an internal email sent by CEO Michael Littleton to this council and executive team regarding my birthday was leaked. And that resulted in an article in a local newspaper which did nothing other than embarrass this council, myself and our new CEO. And it damaged the reputation of the City of Canning, which we've all been really working so hard to rebuild. In my view, it was a really petty and childish act, and it was a betrayal of the trust that we now have in each other, and which we need to work collaboratively in the best interests of the community. So I say to the person who leaked the email, and I don't know who it is, surely you've seen where we were as a council, surely you recognise where we are now as a council, and surely you can see where we are headed. I say to you, either get on the bus or get off it. If you feel disengaged from this council or this organisation, if you feel resentful, if you're now actively and willfully working with those who seek only to damage this council, then I urge you to consider resigning. There is no place in this organisation for a person who would so easily betray the trust of their colleagues. We move on. Item 2, attendances. I'm pleased to see that we have the full council in attendance this evening. Thank you. Approved leave of absence. There are none this evening. Disclosures of interest. Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've received no declarations of financial direct or indirect interest. I have received one declaration of impartiality interest from Councillor Paul Tuchek in relation to item EN 00123, which is a late item at agenda page 59. It is in relation to the award of tender FM 03520 Street Furniture Services and Advertising, and the nature of the association is Councillor Tuchek is a real estate agent and uses advertising on bus stops and a bin in the Willetton area.
Thank you, CEO. At item 4, question time for the public. Any responses to previous questions taken on notice will be noted in the ordinary council meeting agenda for next week. The time set aside is 15 minutes. So can I just ask whether there are any questions from the floor? We have no written questions tonight. Thank you. We will then move on. We won't open public question time at item 4.2. There are no questions, either written or from the floor. Deputations, there are none this evening. At item 5, items brought forward for the convenience of those in the public gallery, there are none. Reports of committee meetings at item 6, there are none. And we move on to reports, the first of which, item 7.1, reports from the Chief Executive's Office, and there are none. At item 7.2, reports from the Office of the Acting Director of Canning Corporate and Commercial, Ms Keely Hayward. And Keely, can I just note that I understand you'll be stepping down from the role in the next few weeks. I wanted to, on behalf of Council, thank you for stepping in and filling the role so wonderfully well. Big shoes to fill, and you did so admirably, so thank you very much for your contribution in the role. Thank you. The item is CC 001 of 23, the title of that report being TPG Telecom, in brackets formerly Vodafone, new lease, lot 29 George Street in Queen's Park. The recommendation is on page 4 of tonight's agenda and is on the screen now. Councillors, any questions in relation to that item? Councillor Jesse Jacobs, and then I'll go to Councillor Bain.
Is there anything we've done a few of these? Is this pretty much the same as what we've done before? Is this anything? I just think it's basically just a 2-year extension, right? There's nothing else new.
I think all the information is contained in the report.
Yeah.
I don't think it's anything
There's
out of
nothing
the ordinary, but certainly just read the report in full. All the information required is in there. Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I note that the previous resolution concerning this item was passed or carried 6-5 in 2018, I think it was. These leases are normally pretty straightforward. Does the city believe that the councillors' concerns on the night have been addressed, even though the footprint of this asset is larger? Thank you.
Ms Hayward.
Thank you for your question. Thank you, Mr Mayor. The proposal that's the subject of the lease before you this evening and for next week is less intrusive than the original proposal. So it replaces an existing light pole rather than the original proposal, which was to be placed on the roof. So we believe so.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bain. Any further questions? Thank you. We shall move on to the next item, which is item CC 002 of 23, monthly financial report for December 2022. The recommendation being on page 18 of tonight's agenda and is also on screen. Councillors, any questions in relation to the monthly financial report? Thank you. We shall move on to CC 003 of 23, a late item, budget review, as at the 31st of January 2023. The officer's recommendation appears on page 2 of the late item agenda and is on screen. Any questions in relation to the late item, budget review? Councillor Bain, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a couple of quick questions. Just requesting further information. Section A, number 1, the deferment of the Paddy Street Laneway project, WSB capacity replacement. If we could just have some further information on that and why it was postponed.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, Councillor Bain, that's in relation to trying to find some capacity in the drainage system that was foregone when the city revamped the Wharf Street Basin. Notionally, we're going to invest in underground drainage cells, but as yet the Water Corporation haven't been able to confirm what sort of capacity we would need to install to offset and compensate for the loss of capacity through the Wharf Street Basin. So until we get absolute clarity on that particular project, we won't be progressing it, but we still intend to progress that project through underground storage, drainage and infrastructure underneath the Paddy Street Laneway.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Bain.
And Section AD, the request for an extra $100,000 for forward planning building projects. What projects are they?
Director.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, I can get some details on that, but it just enables our architecture and project team to do some forward planning on our next list of priority infrastructure projects, primarily the community building space, but I can get a list of those for all elected members.
We'll get that information to you, Councillor Bain. Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Sweeney.
Yeah, thank you. Just on page 6 and page 7, I'd just like some clarification on the cancellation of 7 Oak Street and Hamilton Street. On page 6, it says at D, 13D, reversal of 260k grant, and then there seems to be conflicting with 14B, 7 Oak Street, Hamilton Street project cancelled due to Metronet conflict again at 396k. Could I get some further information with those two figures, whether or not they're the same or...
Director Bowe.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The project that is cancelled as a result of uncertainty regarding the elevated rail at the intersection of Hamilton Street is on the Hamilton Street and Sevenoaks side, and that project was 2/3, 1/3 funded through Main Roads WA, but I'll get some clarity on the exact figures and provide those to all elected members. Councillor Sweeney.
Thank you. Councillor Sweeney.
I just have one more question as well. Just
Yeah, of course.
Bear with me for a second. Just on page 32, under the accounts there where it's our profit and loss disposal of assets, it's got there, and I take this as just gone on for the last term, which is for the last 7 months, we've sold assets to the value of, is that $7.7 million, almost $8 million? If that's the case, couldn't we get some information about what those assets are that have been sold?
Director Bowe.
I think Ms
Ms.
Haywood may be
Ms.
able to
Haywood,
answer
sorry.
that.
Are you able to answer that this evening, or you want to take that on notice?
I'll take it on notice if I may, thank you.
We'll get some information to you, Councillor Sweeney.
Yeah, okay. That's all the questions I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sweeney. Any further questions? Thank you, councillors. We shall move on then to item CC 004 of 23, another late item, monthly financial report for January 2023. The officer's recommendation being on page 22 of the late items agenda and also on screen. Do I have any questions from council in relation to the monthly financial report? Councillor Bain?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just page 36 of the late agenda has CCTV core systems installation. Planned projects will be delivered this year. Can the city expand on which projects they are? Thank you.
Ms Haywood.
Thank you. I would need to obtain a bit more detail on that. Director McQuaid?
Director McQuaid.
Thank you, through you. It's not specific installation of individual site CCTV projects. It is developing standards of provision for what we will deploy. So we have different systems out in our various CCTV at the moment, and how we manage that from an ICT perspective is the piece of work that the project is focused on in the first instance, so that going forward we have a consistency in approach, and then the way in which we install and maintain going forward is well planned for.
Thank you. Councillor Bain, you have anything further? No, nothing. Thank you. Any further questions, councillors, on relation to the monthly financial report? None. Thank you. We shall then move on to the reports from the Director of Canning Planning and Development, the responsible officer being Mr Graham Bride. There are none from that directorate this evening. Item 7.4, the Director of Canning Infrastructure and Environment, Mr Warren Bowe, to my right, to your left. First report being EN 001 of 23. It's again a late item. Award of tender FM 035 of 20, street furniture services and advertising. Excuse me, the recommendation is on page 60 of the late item agenda and is on screen now. Councillors, do you have any questions? Deputy Mayor Ben Kunza. Councillor Kunza.
Yes, Mayor Hall, I have a few questions. I have a few questions regarding the qualitative scores, but I'll ask that independently given that it's under confidential cover. But in terms of paragraph 10 and within the report outlining the controls that the city has in place, who's determined these controls and how has it been, judged? How does that differ to the previous controls under the 2007 agreement? And then I'll go through them individually.
We'll just do the questions one at a time. Yep. Was that the first question?
Yep, that's the first question.
Director Bowe, do these controls in this current iteration differ?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, they do differ from the 2007 arrangements, and ultimately, 15 or so years have elapsed since that time. There's been a number of strategic documents that have been endorsed by the council that have been input and reflected in the new construct of the contract. But ultimately, the learnings that we've garnered over that period of time, our engagement with other local government authorities, and some of the standards that we wish to apply and ensure that our public infrastructure is used for positive messaging more so.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Just following on from that, just going through a few. Obviously, with paragraph 10, section E, subsection 1, that it can't be illegal, that's obvious. But in terms of determining what's immoral or what causes offence, who judges that?
Director Bowe.
That is the city's right, Mr Mayor, under the contract. The city ultimately has to approve any advertising that's placed on its infrastructure.
Deputy Mayor.
But who, in terms of the city, who judges whether it causes offence?
At what level of the organisation is that determined, Director Bowe? I think that's the question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, that would depend on the nature of the specific example. At executive level, the CEO and engagement with our internal legal counsel, I think, would be appropriate. But if the matter required, we may seek external legal advice.
Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, but why would you seek legal advice to determine whether it causes offence to someone? Living in a world where offence is caused quite easily.
Director Bowe.
I think we'd make that decision at the executive level then, Deputy Mayor.
Deputy Mayor.
Following on E2, why are citizens at a local, state or federal level not able to pay for advertising when they're seeking public office? Why does the city have objections to that?
Director.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Historically, that's the interpretation of the contract, and ultimately we have enabled elected officials to advertise their service, the location of their electoral office and their contact details as of right, because we've determined that they provide a service to the community, and not enabling or allowing election signage means that the city can, as reasonably practicable as possible, stay objective and neutral in those election processes.
Deputy Mayor.
And with section G, how would the city define whether an advertisement is unsuitable? Is that if it's referring to the points above?
Director Bowe.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. It would consider those, but I'm happy to provide and consult with our executive and provide a bit more of a considered response to that question, Mr Mayor.
Deputy Mayor.
When council is determining this next week, is council able to amend the terms and conditions of the contract as outlined in the report, or is it already accepted as part of the tender process?
Director Bowe.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, the contract and the construct of the contract has been made available to those tenderers who've responded. Any amendment to them would have to be by negotiation with the preferred contractor.
Sorry, I mean in terms of the controls that I've just been asking questions about.
Director.
Look, I might have to defer to the CEO on to that one, Mr Mayor. I can't answer that.
CEO, at what level in relation to the contract can council actually influence it, considering how far it has also progressed, the tenders coming before council?
Look, I think what is clear is that these conditions have formed part of the tender that the city sought, but it is not uncommon for the city to apply the elements or the will of council that it may well establish through policy provision. So nothing in here, I think, would necessarily preclude us from, for instance, increasing the amount of advertising that may be available. So I wouldn't see that a contractor would necessarily be concerned if we were looking to make it less restrictive as opposed to more restrictive. But we'd probably need to understand, Deputy Mayor, what provisions you're looking for specifically, so that we can understand those things and the context of them a little bit further. So if you are of a mind to look at amending how the city is to assess the advertising submissions that the contractor will make, then they are things that we'd like you to give us some feedback on before you make a decision next week.
Deputy Mayor? Nothing further? Councillor Jacobs, and then I'll go to Councillor Spencer-Teo.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. E2, promote citizen seeking election to public office. I reckon I've run a few times with a few bin signs. This must be a new clause. It's a new one, isn't it?
Director Bowe?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't believe it's a new clause, and yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
So how did I run in 2015 and 2013 plastering the whole place with vote for Jesse Jacobs signs that were the City of Canning bins?
Director, was it just a case that the policy is in place and we chose not to enforce that, or how did that occur?
Unfortunately, that's not a question I can answer, Mr Mayor, other than I can apply how we would interpret the contract and expect the contractor to apply the contract under this current proposal, and that is that your advertising for election wouldn't have been permitted.
Can I just ask on behalf of the councillor, though, I think the question was, and I'm not certain that you were absolutely certain, is this exactly the same, this condition, as it has been over the last, I don't know, decade? You're saying that it is. Can we just get some confirmation that that's the case?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Certainly in my time here with the city, the interpretation has been consistent, but I'm happy to look back at previous to see whether we can identify a different interpretation of the contract provisions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jacobs, anything further?
That's enough for the moment.
Nothing
Mr. Mayor.
further, thank you. Councillor Spencer-Teo?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Through you, it was a bit confusing with all the different tender information, all that, but I just noticed that on one of them, the expiry date or the expected contract date was December, then the expiry date of the process is actually this weekend, so before the OCM. So I just wanted some clarity. Is that going to cause any issues?
Director Bowe?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Spencer-Teo, that was in relation to RFT 11/2021. The restricted tender process had a 90-day validity on it, and that is current until the 3rd of May 2023.
Okay, thank you. Also, on point 10, where it says the city must give approval, this is on the location of the signage, right? Not the actual sign itself. Is that correct?
Director?
The location, but also to ensure that the content of the advertising accords with the parameters of the contract and the restrictions that the Deputy Mayor outlined as well.
So the company providing the advertising will also give us a proof, or the executive a proof of the sign, and that needs to be approved as well as the location. Is that what you're saying?
Director, is each individual sign required to be approved?
The location, Mr Mayor, but I will check up on the process as to whether or not the contractor provides us with a proof before we provide the approval.
Okay, and just on the condition and maintenance of the furniture or bus stops, is there a clause in the contract that gives a minimum period of repair, replacement or maintenance?
Director Bowe?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, the contractor is required to do a weekly inspection of the street furniture and the advertising. Anything that presents a hazard, we can require to be repaired, within 24 hours, or at least the area made good. And there's also a requirement for the street furniture and the associated advertising to be free of graffiti, so those parameters would apply as well.
And it would be the contractor responsible for removing graffiti, not us, is that correct?
Director Bowe?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Thank you. And just echoing the questions around the, obviously the being illegal and immoral, and also the citizens seeking election to public office. So if I get this right, pretty much the only people who can advertise on these this signage is incumbent elected members and real estate agents. So it's fairly restrictive. So I guess along that, I'd like also a bit of rationale as to why we are being so restrictive there. I understand, with the fast foods, but considering fast food chains make up quite a large basis of our ratepayers, I'm just a little bit confused as to why we would exclude them. And also just some clarity over the E2, the promote citizens seeking election to public office. What happens if an incumbent state or federal elected member decides to rerun for office? Does that then mean that we're imposing a caretaker period on them by doing this? So if I could just get some more clarity over that.
Director Bowe, I think there are two questions.
Yeah,
in
thank you,
there.
Mr
The first
Mayor.
was about the rationale behind the restrictions around why we're restricting fast food, for instance, when they're such a large part of the City of Canning as a ratepayer base, particularly down Albany High. And the second part was
Are we
I think the second
basically
second part was
invoking
about
a...
caretakers.
caretaker period,
Look,
about political.
I'll take the issue of, or the question regarding caretaker provisions on notice. The specific example about sitting members or sitting elected officials, as I've just redressed my initial response to the Deputy Mayor, the contract is constructed so as not to expose the city to accusations of enabling electioneering through its advertising on its public infrastructure. And we have maintained the position that sitting members provide a service to the community, that they're accessible to the community. If a sitting member of Parliament or a sitting elected member of the council wished to run for council, then we wouldn't permit any signage or advertising on the public infrastructure that promoted their re-election, whilst we would still maintain that they're able to advertise their availability to the constituents that they serve.
Councillor Spencer too.
Sorry, Mr Mayor. The other issue regarding the contract and our exclusion of fast food advertising and alcohol, we acknowledge that impacts the financial return and the financial equation that the offering of this contract provides. However, we have based the specification and the contract requirements on council endorsed policies, primarily the city's public health plan, and that is the content of the contract that we've offered to the market at the moment.
Councillor Spencer Teo.
Just on that, under points 38, 40, 41, 42, where it's got policy implications, the public health plan's not listed there. Could we get that on there for the OCM?
Director Bowe.
Yes, we can. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
Any other questions in relation to that item? Councillor Sweeney, and then I'll come to Councillor Parkinson. Councillor Sweeney?
Yes, thank you. So just picking up off that last question, Mr Bowe, are you saying from the administration point of view is that we are discriminating against fast food outlets to advertise at these locations because of our own health plan? Is that what you're saying?
Director Bowe?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No, I don't believe that I'm discriminating and that the administration's discriminating. What we've done is applied the council endorsed public health plan and reflected that in the contract that we've offered to the market.
Councillor Sweeney?
Yes, but we are singling out fast food outlets and saying that they are not allowed to advertise at these locations. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. Director Bowe?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
And just finally, is there anyone else or is there any other business that we are cancelling out, that we are saying that they're not permitted to advertise in this space?
Director Bowe, do you want to read the list of businesses in the report?
I won't, Mr Mayor, no, but I will provide some written information on that. But paragraph 10E5 aims to cover off on a number of those businesses that we have restricted from advertising as part of this contract.
Thank you. CEO?
Yeah, well, just to add, Mr Mayor, it's not only those provisions in 5, but obviously smoking, those products that alcohol consumption or alcohol products. So there is certainly a broad range of products that that the city, through these guidelines, are looking to restrict from advertising on that public infrastructure. So that's the policy provision that that the city's sought to take.
Councillor Sweeney, anything further?
Not at this stage, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parkinson?
What sort of revenue is this contract going to earn the city?
It's a confidential item at the moment, I think. Is it commercial in confidence?
It is, Mr Mayor, but the values are contained in the confidential attachment.
There's a confidential attachment to the point, you might not have got to it yet, Councillor Parkinson, and the figures are in the confidential item. Look, I'll just ask a question on that, just following on the sentiment expressed by a number of councillors. Look, I'm worried about the Trade Practices Act and the restriction on trade. I'm worried about the legal ramifications for the city. I do understand, Director and CEO, that the tenderers have been asked to tender on a contract and they are the requirements of the city and that is what they've tendered on. But are we worried about restriction of trade? I don't understand how we can have a fast food outlet or a liquor outlet paying us $100,000 a year in rent or hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in rates, I'm sorry, but they can't, and they've got the big yellow M for as big as a building on the street, yet right in front of it they can't put any advertising on a bin. Would that be covered by the Trade Practices Act? Have we got any concern about that?
I don't think so, Mr Mayor, no.
There's no restriction on trade?
There are restrictions on restricting trade, but this wouldn't fall under any of those prohibited acts.
And I just asked the question, I think I know the answer. Director, can I just ask you, all of the business sectors that have been excluded under this tender, they are all legal businesses, aren't they? We're not restricting anything that's actually illegal. These are not illegal practices, the selling of liquor or the selling of fast food. These are not illegal enterprises, are they?
You're correct, Mr Mayor. They're not illegal enterprises. But I will just put forward, it is not only the advertising revenue that is of value to this city as part of this contract. It is the provision of the street bins, the street furniture, and the bus shelters. The derived revenue adds to the equation, and we derive value from the market through retaining a proportion of the advertising revenue garnered by the contract. But it is not the sole driver of this contract. The contractor, the appointed contractor, is required to maintain and keep up to a suitable standard the public infrastructure that they invest in and install on the city's behalf, which provides us with a significant benefit, both in terms of not having to maintain or provide the infrastructure. So whilst we do derive a proportion of revenue from the advertising, it's not the main driver for this arrangement.
Okay. CEO.
Yeah, look, just to add, it's not only those things that Director Bowe has just spoken about, but obviously these things are branded and can, in some instances, be co-branded with City of Canning motifs, etc. So, from a reputational viewpoint, we do have and have to consider what and how we apply advertising in the public realm. Whilst you're welcome to consider the criteria that we define, but I do think it's wise to contemplate how we partner and who we partner with. They are just things that most government entities, including local governments, focus on and consider as we're developing these types of contract arrangements.
Just on that, CEO, just a question to you, and only because you raised it. Is the city concerned about the reputational damage of us being ridiculed as becoming the moral police of of Western Australia. I mean, these are not illegal businesses. I do not understand why Hungry Jack's or Donut King or anybody else can't put a label on a bin in the City of Canning. Why are the city staff, the officers here, imposing restrictions on businesses in a economic powerhouse local government that talks about being open for business? I really don't understand it.
Well, it's probably not for me to debate tonight, Mr Mayor, but we're not looking to restrict trade, and we're not looking to impose restrictions on any of those businesses. They are important elements of our precinct, and they will continue to be popular. The question here is whether these are the sorts of things that we want to put on public infrastructure. I'm not looking to debate with any individuals around what's appropriate or what isn't, but it is not uncommon for local governments or governments generally to apply some view as to what organisations it choose to partner with in the public realm. This is not uncommon in local government, and the City of Canning is looking to apply those same standards. It is looking to follow the guides that it has in its policy documents and its public health plan, as Director Bowe has already said. We try and promote healthy, active living. We're certainly not trying to overcomplicate it, but it is the public realm and it is the city's infrastructure, and I think we are entitled to do the things that we wish to do with that infrastructure.
Thank you. Just one final question from me, then I'll come to Councillor Jacobs, then I'll come to Councillor Sweeney. A question to you, Director Bowe. When was the last time the City actually conducted an audit of these assets? I could name a number of bins that are in places where bin has no need to be, and seats that are obviously put at busy intersections facing into traffic that are obviously there for no other reason than to carry signage. When was the last time we had a needs basis analysis or audit of this infrastructure?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We did a condition audit probably about 2 years ago when we were compiling the inventory for this tender. There are elements of public infrastructure out there that are not owned by the current contractor, that are actually city assets. But certainly we also have a proposed replacement schedule from the preferred contractor. I'm happy to distribute that under separate cover to the elected members after tonight's meeting in preparation for next week's OCM.
Just in relation to clarifying the question, though, the question is not about a condition report. It's about needs analysis. It's about have we ever done an audit to determine whether those assets are actually required in the positions that they have been in. At some time ago, years ago, this council looked at clutter from signage, and we were looking at trying to reduce the amount of clutter in the city. We've got bins in places that I would hazard to guess have never been used, and they just seem to have been erected there for the purpose of allowing contractors to place signage on them. So that was the question in relation to an audit of asset need.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks for the clarification. I don't believe we've done a needs analysis, but I can take that offline and discuss with the relevant staff about how we move forward with that.
Thank you. Councillor Jacobs, first of all, and then I'll go to Councillor Sweeney.
Would it be possible to take all of those restrictions out and just let the federal government legislate? Because I believe the Federal Register of Legislation has Tobacco Advertising Prohibition Act 1992 and Tobacco Advertising Prohibition Regulation 1993, which prohibits any tobacco, cigarettes advertising. So would it be possible just to take all the restrictions off and let the higher levels of government regulate this sort of thing?
Director Bowe?
I think it would be possible, Mr Mayor, but then again, we would need to go back to the preferred contractor, and if not all respondents, to re-clarify the requirements of the contract.
Thank you. Councillor Jacobs?
And if we were to take all the controls off and let the federal government, state government, wouldn't that not increase the value of our revenue?
Director, would that have a direct impact on the tender?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think I've already acknowledged that the restrictions that we have applied through this contract do limit the value that we can derive from it financially. But that's weighed up against the alignment of the contract requirements with council-endorsed plans and policies. So I think removing the restrictions would no doubt derive a better financial return. That's
Thank
not
you.
our recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Sweeney.
Yeah, just one final question for the CEO. Is it possible for us to get some legal opinion on what we've just been speaking about? Because I do have a concern if we're using our own moral compass to determine whether or not we're going to do business or accept advertising from one group of businesses and not others. I do have some concerns about that, and I would like to think that we probably need to get some sort of legal clarification in regards to where we stand with that, with our standing.
CEO.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Look, I think our General Counsel has probably given a clear indication that there is no legal impediment to us applying the restrictions that we're talking about. In fact, I would argue that it is commonplace. So it's not something that is unique to the City of Canning that we are here talking about what restrictions we would impose or otherwise. But yeah, look, I think our legal counsel, our General Counsel, has given that advice. Happy to provide that advice in writing if that's necessary. I think it's more than appropriate for the city to apply some restriction and control. I appreciate the debate around what that restriction should be, but if there is advertising that is applied that is not, if we remove the restrictions and it's a carte blanche, then I think council would want to have or be able to apply some control at some point in time throughout the life of this contract. So I would be careful about removing restrictions. I think that is unwise. I think you should be able to be in control of the sorts of things that happen on our infrastructure or in our public realm. We would apply those same restrictions or those same controls to everything that we do. So we've got to be able to make some determinations, councillors.
Can I ask our legal counsel then to do just that? Could you advise council in relation to, I guess Councillor Sweeney's question is in relation to if the matter was ever challenged, would the council, would this organisation be covered? And I do take the point, as the CEO rightly said, that people are signing on to this tender accepting the conditions that are in there, but if somebody outside the tender wanted to advertise on the bid and was rejected because of this this policy, I guess that we would need to know that that challenge would withstand that scrutiny. Is that advice you're able to provide generally?
Yes, I am, and I will circulate something in writing.
Would you be able to do that for us before the OCM? Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Councillors. Councillor Spencer-Teo.
Sorry, just a couple quick ones. I noticed that the public health plan is due for renewal this year. It was 2019 to 2023. Is that something that we will review this year or next year?
Director Bowe? Oh, Director Bride, sorry.
Yeah, through Mr Mayor, yes, that's on our 2023-24 service plan to review and take that back to council.
Thank you. And secondly, with the, I noticed other local governments don't allow the advertising of fast foods as such. For example, you can't have hamburgers and French fries on the advertising. However, you can have directional signage like McDonald's 300 metres up on the right. If we were to allow that, would you still believe that it was in contradiction to our public health plan?
Director Bride.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'll have to take that one on notice and get back to the relevant staff.
And just as a follow-up, if so, then what, as Mayor Hall touched on before, then what's the difference between that and allowing them to advertise their own business on their own land, like the Big M, as you mentioned? So how does that contradict each other? That's it, thank you.
Thank you. The other question was from, someone else had a question? None. Thank you, councillors. We will move on. Thank you, Director Bowe and the other directors and our CEO. We will move to EN 002 of 23, also a late item, the award of tender FM 033 of 161, request for the replacement of 3 new waste side loader trucks. Officer's recommendation is on screen, is on page 74 of the late items agenda. Any questions on that item? Councillor Spencer-Teo?
Just wanted to clarify that this is part of EN 01222, where we endorsed the multi-year projects, which included the renewal of our fleet to the value of $1.2 million. That this isn't in addition to that.
Director Bowe, is this in addition to that?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No, it's not in addition. It was flagged last year as a procurement process we needed to undertake to renew the waste fleet.
So would it then be appropriate to put under relevant council resolutions, that resolution I said EN 01222, because that relates to that decision?
Director Bowe, would it be worth noting that in the report?
I'll have a look into that, Mr Mayor.
Because that's where I got rather confused. I was like, I'm sure I've seen this before, but I couldn't remember, and then I was able to.
I'll just confirm whether that recommendation was endorsed, though, at the time. I know
it was
a
deferred,
recommendation.
and then
Right.
it was eventually endorsed.
Okay,
yeah.
I'll look into the history of that resolution, Mr Mayor, and confirm.
You're going to be busy, aren't you, in the next couple of days? Yeah.
Sorry, Director Bowe.
All right, thank you. Any other questions on that item? Councillor Jacobs, and then I'll go to the Deputy Mayor. Councillor Jacobs.
I know we've got Wadington 12, but are we confident we're getting the best kit? Obviously, we have lots of waste drivers. I mean, are they confident that this is the best kit? I mean, it's all well to do Wadings, but are we confident that we're getting the best kit that we can get for our money's worth?
Kit, you're talking about trucks?
Yeah, I'm talking about best waste trucks that we can get for our money.
I imagine that we are confident. Director Bowe?
We are confident, Mr Mayor. We've done the qualitative and the quantitative assessment, but we've also incorporated as part of the assessment engaging a number of our drivers and had them undertake an ergonomic review and sat in the truck, and also the recommendation to purchase this type of vehicle, as you'll see in the report, aligns with some of our existing fleet that we already have that provide that service and that our operators use. So yes, we are confident.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Kunza.
Through you to Director Bowe, Mr Mayor. Just with respect to the fact that they take 240 and 360 litre bins, are these able to be used should we have to go to a 3-bin system for FOGO and GO? Or does that require additional expenditure?
Director Bowe.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No, that won't require any additional expenditure. These vehicles can be used to provide that service.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer-Teo.
Sorry, just one more. With the costs provided in the report, does that include the signage that the trucks will need to get to fit in with our current fleet?
Director Bowe.
No, it doesn't, Mr Mayor. We would change over those decals and advertising to promote our other waste initiatives, and they're an operational cost that we would bear at that particular time.
Thank you. Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I note that a number of local governments in WA have trialled electric waste vehicles. Did we look into that as part of the decision-making process and or purchasing a low-emissions vehicle?
Director Bowe.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thanks for the question, Councillor Bain. We have been looking into fully electric waste truck for a while. We don't believe that the market will be able to respond to meet our needs in the short term, but it's certainly something that we'll be looking at in the future as well.
Thank you. Councillor Bain.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a couple more. Given that the vehicles will be paid for and delivered in the 23-24 financial period, did the city consider purchasing them after we conducted a waste review?
Director Bowe, was that considered?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It certainly was considered, and we did a risk assessment of progressing this procurement in light of the absence of the waste review. These vehicles will be needed regardless, and the other consideration was with the long lead-in times and with the demand for vehicles at the time, we would think that even if we changed direction significantly in that interim period, we would be able to, in effect, defer the order because there would be other suitors for those vehicles.
Thank you. Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This item is confidential, so I'll be careful. As far as the emission ratings are concerned, Can the city just provide further information? It's the truck summary review table is a bit hard to understand as far as EU-Europe, etc. Can you tell us which vehicles have the lowest emissions? Thank you.
In plain English.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I won't be able to do that tonight, but I'm certainly happy to provide that in writing to all elected members prior to next week.
Thank you. And thank you for your sensible questions on that item, councillors. I had a bit of deja vu there. Some years ago, the City of Canning Council dealt with an item about the procurement of waste vehicles that featured strongly in the Kendall report inquiry into that resulted in the sacking of the council back in 2012. So these issues can get a council into terrible trouble if they don't deal with them with great respect, and I very much appreciate the sensible questioning of councillors tonight on the matter. Thank you. Item 7.5, Dr Sarah McQuaid, Director of Canning Customer and Community. No reports from that directorate. We have a number of notices of motion for consideration at the next ordinary council meeting, which will be next Tuesday evening, the first of which is NOM 001 of 23, the responsible officer being Director Warren Bowe, the Director of Infrastructure and Environment, and that is titled Additional Water Sources for Birds in Canning. The notice of motion is on page 60 of the agenda and is also on screen. Councillors, any questions in relation to that item? Councillor Bain. Thank you, Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I support the intention of the NOM, just requiring some further information from the city, if that's possible, to provide before the OCM. I'm presuming that we're looking to purchase the bird waterers from the town of Victoria Park. Could the city please provide further information as to possibly a design, a concept design that is, how they work, etc., etc. Do they facilitate other local native birds that are endemic to the area, and in addition to the black cockatoos, and how they connect to local scheme water sources? Just further information would be appreciated in the decision-making process. Thank you.
No problem at all. Have you actually seen one, Mark, up close? There's actually one in Rossbourne Park. There's a number around town of Victoria Park. The mayor there, I think, recently put up a couple of videos about birds in the baths and that. So there are a number already in the City of Canning. Deputy Mayor, where else are they? We've got another one somewhere. Rossbourne Park.
Willetton High School, Willetton Reserve, and Riverton Primary School.
Yes, there's a few around already. So you can certainly get out and have a look, but the director will get that information to you. 100%. Any other questions on that item before we move on? No further questions on that item. Thank you. We'll move on to the final item of the evening, and that's Notice of Motion 002 of 23. There's a Notice of Revocation of Motion NOM 010 of 2020, and that was from 8th of December 2020 Ordinary Council meeting. The Notice of Revocation, I think Council is aware of it. The Notice of Motion is on page 62 of tonight's agenda and is also on screen. Any queries on that one? Any questions from the floor, councillors? Councillor Sweeney, yes.
Yeah, just a question for the CEO just in regards to the process here, because this is, if I recall, this happened some couple of years ago when it went to council and a decision was made in regards to this. I'm just wondering, are we saying, or is the CEO saying from the administration point of view that no work has been done to date? Because Kent Street Weir is a major project. Are we saying that no work has been done as a result of the decision of council back in 2020, December 8, 27 months ago? Is that what we're saying here?
CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. What we're saying is that that there is no reason why council can't consider the revocation motion in front of it. We haven't substantially progressed the design of the play space. On that basis, you know, we believe, or I believe, that it's certainly available to council to revoke a motion and to provide a subsequent motion as is indicated in part 2.
Councillor Sweeney.
Yeah, okay, that wasn't sort of the answer I was looking for in regards to my question. My question really is specifically looking at a decision made by this council some over 2 years ago, and it just for want of a better word, I suppose it's been sitting in somebody's inbox and it hasn't been actioned. So we have a decision of council some 2 years ago that hasn't been actioned, and I'm just wondering where we sit with that.
CEO, sure what to say to that.
Well, I can only restate my earlier position. It is available or open for this council to consider the revocation motion that has been proposed and to consider the alternative motion. The design of the play space hasn't substantially progressed. There has certainly been some concept work done, but it is open for the city to clarify, for council to clarify its intent in relation to ultimately the design of the play space at Kent Street. So my advice or my position is that it is open for council to consider the motion to revoke and to consider an alternative motion. But ultimately, whether council agrees or disagrees will be a decision that it will make next Tuesday.
Thank you, CEO. Any further questions on that? Councillor Jacobs.
Yeah, I just got one final thing.
Councillor
I
Swain.
won't finish here because I just want to be clear with this, and I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree with what you're saying, but just so that we're clear, and I'm just one after a yes or no answer, that this item over 2 years ago has not been actioned by the city. Just yes or no?
I think that's a no.
Right. Is that right, Mr. CEO?
I don't think the CEO can add any more to the two answers that he gave you, which are the same. I mean, it was quite unequivocal.
Fine.
Thank you. Councillor Jacobs.
I'm just trying to struggle, like, it doesn't, I look at one and look at two. What's the intent, the actual intent of this is, it just seems to be, I look at the words, it's very similar. What is the, I mean, I look at the rationale, but I don't really see the difference because it's going to be both are inclusive. So one's saying,
No, both are not inclusive. That's the reason for the revocation. Have you read the full report?
well, yeah, one saying that they're going to have some special play equipment that people can use, and I believe in number two, you'd also have special equipment that they could use too, right?
Have you read the full report and the legal advice and the report that's attached to the report from?
I've had a look at all the documents that have been here in the AB today, but I just trying to understand the benefit when we're still going to build a park, and I'm sure there's going to be equipment that people can use that are of all abilities, right?
There's no doubt. I mean, there's obviously play equipment that'll be used for people with disability, but at the moment, obviously, the decision of council was to build pretty much two separate playgrounds beside each other. And the advice taken has been, and I think the revocation, just to paraphrase it, is that children with disabilities should be playing with able-bodied children. I mean, they should be playing together and not separated. And I think that was the philosophy and the intent of the motion, notice of motion. Can I ask Director McQuaid to maybe, have you got a comment on that? I've got Councillor Jacobs is just struggling with the difference between these two here, and you obviously have read the report.
Yes. In simplest terms, I think the concern has always been that, we should be aiming for inclusivity, and when we're looking at developing new playgrounds, we should be looking to ensure that they include the ability for all abilities to participate within the playgrounds. That is the research that we've had. That's the basis of our disability access and inclusion plan. And I think that's what we're trying to say, is that we don't want one next to the other.
Director Bowe, are you able to add anything just based on the question posed by Councillor Jacobs?
Oh, if I could, Mr Mayor, I think the clear difference between the two elements of the report aim to remove the operative word beside the standard play equipment, and when reviewing the Inclusion Solutions report and also when obtaining the external legal advice, the departure by the use of that word beside against our policies, access and inclusion policy, was felt to be disconnected with our policies, and as a result, as you would see, we support the notice of motion to particularly realign and reintegrate accessibility elements for people of all abilities within the district playground at Kent Street.
Councillor Jacobs.
Just one follow-up and then I'll be done. Thanks, Mr Mayor. I believe that Councillor Holland's no longer with us, but I believe...
He's still alive.
Well,
So
he's no longer with us
unless
in
you've heard
council.
something I have. Oh, he's no longer a councillor.
He's moved to another inferior place that's not in
Okay.
Canning.
Yeah.
I don't know where that is, Southern River or something. He should come back, but at least into the city of Canning. But I believe it's not his intent by writing the words in one. We can get pedantic, but was his not intent to make sure that, I mean...
We can't speak about his intent here, Councillor. I mean, we can't speak for Councillor Holland and we can't talk to his intent. We can only talk to the report that we have in front of us. CEO Michael Littleton.
Yeah, look, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, when you look back at the transcripts, I believe that that there was a lot of debate around the wording. I think the intent, my understanding is our intent is to provide an inclusive play space. That is ultimately the desire of this council. I think any motion that clearly demonstrates that fact should be supported, and I think that's the intent of this process. So whilst I think the debate created some confusion, I think this goes or seeks to clarify it and make sure that there is no uncertainty and there is no debate. It is clearly our intention and our direction to provide an inclusive play space, which is there and established for all abilities, which will be really critical for us.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Hardeep Singh.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. My question is, will there be any cost savings if council decides to support this notice of omission? Or will it be exactly the same cost?
Director Bowe, will there be any cost implications, plus or minus?
Oh, I don't believe so, Mr Mayor, because as the CEO indicated before, we haven't undertaken any detailed design or further work on the playground since 2020. So we have a notional project budget allocated and also included in the long-term financial plan for this element of the broader precinct. So we don't anticipate to adjust up or down the allocated funding to deliver this district playground, and certainly I don't believe the notice of motion influences the cost or the value of that playground anyway.
Thank you. Councillor Singh, anything further? You happy with that? Any further questions? Deputy Mayor looking a bit concerned. Deputy Mayor.
There'd probably be some cost savings in terms of providing a separate area. And now we'll be providing, if endorsed, one area. So I'd imagine there'd be some cost saving and potential fencing or anything like that.
Possibly. I think the director's saying that at the moment, because no design work's been undertaken, they can't confirm either way whether there will or won't be. There possibly will be, there possibly won't be, but it's too early to say. Am I right, Director Bowe? Is that... Don't wish to put words in your mouth.
Oh, that's correct, Mr Mayor. That's what I was trying to say.
That's what he tried to say. Any further questions, councillors, before we sign off for the evening? Thank you very much for joining us on Valentine's Day. What a lovely spot to spend together. Council meeting on Valentine's Day. We'll have to do this more often. At item 9, that's the end of reports for this evening. At item 9, urgent business, there are none. At confidential matters, at item 10, there are none under consideration tonight. And at the item 11, closure, there being no further business, I now declare the agenda briefing closed, the time being 7:11 p.m. I thank everyone for their attendance and good night.